It's been 3 weeks since The Last of Us Part 2 released, and having beat the game myself about a week ago, I've had enough time to reflect on the question if the hate and the outrage that the game is getting is justified. Hopefully, you have had the chance to beat the game yourself, as this video will contain many spoilers. If you haven't, I hope you return when you do to hear why I believe it does deserve it. You can check out the link to my non-spoiler written review in the description below, or for a more in-depth explanation, as this will be a more concise video just focusing on 3 main points. If you haven't played the game yet, I still recommend it as it is a good game, but play it on the hardest difficulty of Survivor right off the bat, as the difficulty adds to the enjoyment. I purposefully avoided any major spoilers until I beat the game, which resulted in me having a more positive view of the game both going into it and afterwards. With that said, let's jump into my top 3 reasons why the reception from the majority of players have been negative, and why you might be severely disappointed if you loved the original like I did. The first and main thing for me is that the game sacrifices the realism and sense of groundedness for a more of an action and adventure focus. What I mean by this is that there are times when enemies can kill Ellie or her friends just by shooting them, which they would do since all factions are just killing each other without restraint. But there are several times where poor writing leads to unrealistic situations, for convenience, or used to build tension unsuccessfully. This works in games like Uncharted, which does this a lot with Nathan Drake dodging bullets and surviving over-the-top situations, but it doesn't work here for The Last of Us Part 2, because despite being another post-apocalyptic zombie game that naturally has flaws in its logic, the story in the past has focused more on being realistic and relying more on characters and what people would do to survive this hellish environment. Joel in the first game lost part of his humanity when his daughter dies, and ended up being a smuggler and doing some terrible things to survive. So it's more plausible that this character, while developing his skills to survive, has grown numb and justifies the atrocities he commits. While Ellie, growing up in Tommy's camp for the past several years, wouldn't have needed to constantly think about survival, while she was trained during patrols, which is a whole nother rant, and proves her skill while surviving during the first game when Joel is injured. Her character isn't portrayed as someone who wants or is physically capable of taking down all that stands in her way. The 2016 trailer and the current promotional art portrays Ellie as consumed by anger and blind hatred, but in-game we get a more subdued, stoic, and conflicted character who we often see killing her main enemies by accident or after a chase or struggle. The Last of Us Part 2 sacrifices genuinely disturbing groups like David's cannibals and larger moral quandaries like the ones set up at the end of the first game in favor of lavish and beautiful set pieces that are gratifying to watch but only temporarily. There are a bunch of cool moments, like playing as both Ellie and Abby when they confront each other, but the lack of choice and nuance really dictates the way you should feel by the end. The second reason the game is receiving a lot of negative responses is the fact that the story moves away from Ellie and Joel and tries to get you to care about characters that aren't as strongly developed as in the first game. I'm not mad at the decision that Joel is killed off, as the first trailer from 2016 basically sets that up, and the story of revenge only works if Joel is the one who is killed, since he means the most to Ellie. But similar to the first point, the writing isn't as strong in this game, not only in the setup of the game, but also what plays out afterwards. And by the end of the game, you still don't care much of the new characters. I actually grew to like Abby because of the amount of time we spend with her and her change over the course of the game. Again, the writing could have been better, and I don't know why it is the weakest part with so much talent on the team. For example, we don't really get to experience what sparks the change in Abby's character. We are set up to hate her as a character at the beginning, but the developers failed to change people's minds about her, which is why so many people are still as upset from hearing the spoilers in May before the game was even released. I understand that Abby, similar to Ellie, is focused on getting revenge on Joel since he killed her father at the end of the first game. We are told that Abby is Isaac's go-to person, and she isn't remorseful or worried about getting her hands dirty. But the fact that she tortures Joel, and immediately after we start playing her section, she starts acting like a moral and righteous character. It isn't explained or implied that Joel's death is what causes her to change, as she ultimately starts feeling guilty and rescues Lev and his sister because of it. She talks about guilt often, but why all of a sudden? She's probably killed dozens in the name of the WLF, and she doesn't even show remorse for killing or torturing Joel. She could have realized that Joel's death didn't bring her the satisfaction she was hoping for, and she went through a change of heart similar to Owen, who just realized at some point convenient to the story that killing people is wrong. Or her connection to Lev is what transformed her. Ultimately, while Abby goes through an okay redemption arc, Ellie is given the short end of the stick. While she does ultimately let Abby live, it's only after she throws away the lives of her few dear friends, dozens of people just trying to survive, and even walking away from her ideal life. She even beats down an already barely standing Abby until she has this change of heart at the very last second. The flashback reveals knowledge that Ellie already had, like Abby being the one to let her and Tommy survive, and also reconnecting with Joel after the events of the bar scene. But she only changes her mind at the very last second, like defusing a bomb with a timer. The last thing that isn't related to the story or the characters is just the backlash against the mainstream gaming websites, who praise this game as being a flawless masterpiece. Or talked about some issues in their review but still gave it a perfect 10 out of 10 score, despite having an undeniably weak story. There have been controversy about Sony or Naughty Dog reaching out to contact reviewers that didn't like their game or highlighted a weak area that didn't sound good in their review. Since early reviews are so important for sales and only a small group are trusted with review copies, there are definitely opportunities for coercion or pressure to make the games look good, especially for the huge first-party games like this. If this is actually the case, it really highlights how things haven't changed much between large game companies and larger review sites getting access to games early for favorable reviews. These companies will always find people to play ball with, so it's a system that will not go away anytime soon. This reminds me of the controversy at GameSpot that led to Jeff Gertzman being terminated before he created Giant Bomb, which was now over a decade ago. It's obvious when sources like Game Informer do this when they're owned by GameStop, but you often see biased reviews from places like IGN always reviewing games they get exclusives for and rating them higher. Despite your opinions of this game, and some feeling like this game ruined the potential of the series, death threats that the developers and voice actors are receiving are detestable and just adds to the toxic nature of some gaming communities. Overall, those were my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. I thought it was a good game, even a great game at times, but in no ways perfect or better than its predecessor. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Did you enjoy the overall experience? Did you see the leaks and did the game actually change your opinion? Let me know if you liked the video by liking or commenting. If this gets more than my average views, I may create more follow-up videos to go into more detail. Keep the comments nice, productive, and helpful, and I'll see you all next time.